Fellow tennis nerds, I hope all is well. Today I'm here with a guy I'm sure you all know, Beckett from Tencom. We've spent a whole week together at the Tennis Warehouse in San Luis Obispo, so we've been chatting quite a lot and playing lots of tennis, actually. So it's been a lot of fun. More videos to come with Beckett. If you're a member of Tennis Nerd, you will see the video where he's being interviewed and we talk about his racket, but there will be more stuff also for you YouTube subs. So how are you today, Beckett?
I'm doing awesome. I'm lucky to have had no jet lag because I just get to fly down the coast to Tennis Warehouse, so the adjustment's been pretty easy. But it's pretty wet here, not as wet as where you are. So the only court we could find for today was 10 to 11 p.m. So Simon's booked it. We are playing.
Oh, I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
That's the nerdy way to do it. Like you take the court that is the most inconvenient time, no matter what, right?
yeah. At least the traffic will be good, so I can rip down there quick.
Yeah. Is it far away or?
It's a little far. I can probably get there in about 20 minutes if I hustle. My traffic's fine, but if it's bad, it'll be like 45.
Oh well. Yeah. Okay. So then 10 is good. Then it's good. Today, as maybe some people know, we've had a lot of rain here in the Malaga area. I'm luckily not live in Malaga because there the whole airport is flooded, and there's no chance of catching a flight. There's water everywhere on the streets. There was a tornado earlier. I am in the mountains in Marbella, so I'm a little bit more lucky in that sense. So we haven't had it too bad, but we'll see tomorrow. So no tennis for me, but I played yesterday because you have to play tennis. It's a force of nature that you have to do. We really had like some kind of free day at this tennis warehouse trip. We were supposed to run with ASIC shoes, but Beck and I we did a mutiny and we decided to go look for tennis courts instead because we are tennis nerds, tennis players. And we did find one, and then we got kicked off, and then we found another one, and we managed to play a little bit extra because we haven't had a lot of time to play and record just me and him. So the video's been focused on reviewing. What was your general feeling of this whole trip? It was a pretty cool trip. We met some really nice people. What's your take?
So it was definitely like among the best full weeks of my life. I'm not a big traveling guy, so it's hard for me to find a routine when I travel. So I kind of like the fact that it was so heavily structured, especially at the beginning. I think it made it easy for the five of us also to kind of connect because we weren't having to negotiate, what are we going to do today? It's just like we're going, we're just going to talk about whatever. We don't have to, make sure everyone's happy because we were all just pretty much happy to be there. It was awesome to see how TW does everything. Like, I cannot believe how rigorous they are with their reviews and their processes. It's like quite intense. So if any viewers are doubting how serious Tennis Warehouse takes their reviews, you can't be because they're insane. They're hardcore and dedicated.
Yeah, the production team of like their I mean this is a part of like we're doing super reviews, so that's what they call them. But I think this is pretty much what they do for all their reviews. It's like they have a proper production, lighting, sound, and if I compare my own reviews, which is basically me and hopefully some other guy or guys, and then I use like some Rode mics and move around with my iPhones. You feel like a beginner pretty much, you know. But you do a better job with your cool cameras and some nice acting in your videos, which I don't do in mine.
Well, I try, but the crazy thing for me is not even the camera crew and all that part, but the whole, like, Brittany is the one who like will take the meeting with the supplier or the manufacturer, learn about everything, and she assigns the play testers to the product to make sure the fit is right, because as you know, it's pretty hard to review rackets that aren't kind of designed for you as a player. Unless it's a Gamma Big Bubba, then it's easy. um, and then just the amount of, they put a huge amount of time into their written articles. They're very highly processed in terms of making sure the information is consistent and accurate and clear and easy to read. Whereas I will do one edit, press publish on my website, and then forget about it.
Yeah, I think it's tough when you're a one-man band. I mean, you're a two-man band, and I have also kind of like a two-man band with some extras thrown in. Stefan is helping me. He's kind of your Simon, although he doesn't play a lot of tennis. He can hit the ball, but he doesn't play a lot of tennis. But he loves sports. He follows tennis, and bets on tennis. Sadly for him, um, he bets on everything, pretty much. But so it's good to have another person there. But if you have like a whole team set up as well, they've been around for so long. But as with you, I like the first time I joined a trip like this, which was not to the States, I was super impressed. I was like, okay, this is how you do it properly, right? I've been involved in productions, like bigger budget productions, like I did some series and I did like commercials for my previous job, but yeah, this is cool that this kind of love is given to a tennis channel, a tennis product, because it's tough to get subscribers in tennis. I mean, Tennis Warehouse, they're around 100,000, but I think that's one of the biggest, at least the biggest review channel for sure, biggest gear channel. But it's tough, as you know, like to get any kind of size of demographic. It's like your every subscriber is well appreciated in tennis.
Yeah, 100,000, and they've been around for so long. I think a lot of other sport warehouses, if they had been around for that long, could like definitely be a little bigger, just from a following perspective. But I've found, I'm sure you've noticed this as well, tennis seems to be a lot more in the mainstream consciousness now. I think the ATP is doing a much better job promoting the pros and showing the personalities now, so it's making it easier and more, um, giving you that more human connection, so you really want to follow what's going on. And we're seeing it more on social media as well, even just from a lifestyle perspective, even though that's not necessarily the content that you and I would produce or consume. I like seeing that it's, in other people's minds rather than just the hardcore fan.
Yeah, we need to kind of broaden the interest in tennis. I think that's the general feeling you have, and that's not that easy. I mean, we're kind of on the nerdy side of things, so it's not so easy to think about broadening because we're both kind of specific in like gear and strings and rackets. But for many people, it's we need to get broader interest. And like Federer and Rafa, they brought a lot of players. I'm sure Novak brought a lot of players as well. But then now, after the goats kind of leaving the game, where do we go from here? And I think I agree with you. ATP, they're doing a better job. WTA, on the other hand, is maybe not doing a better job. I don't know, but it feels like they're a little bit lagging behind. But maybe there's hope in the horizon.
Yeah, I don't know from their side, because, everything we hear about the sports management at the top is not super agreeable. But, meeting people like Naya, who was on the trip with us, who's like a very down to earth, relatable person, and I think provides content that inspires the regular person. Like, I really don't think you need to be some elite player to be a trusted figure who inspires people to pick up a racket and get on court.
No, I think that's important. It's important to make it relatable. I think that is people want to be related to, so they want to feel like they can easily pick up a racket. I think the issue with tennis is the threshold is so high, right? So you feel like okay, it's going to be impossible if we take someone like Naya. She's been playing, I guess, for 2 years. She told us, and like she hits a good
Mm-hmm.
ball for 2 years, pretty impressive.
Totally.
And if you're a athletic person with some skill and you work at it, I think you can actually play tennis sooner than or like good tennis a bit sooner than we used to think was possible. Like because the everybody's like working so long to kind of get a good rally, but I think you can kind of do it if you're really intent and you we work on it. And the tennis needs to make that step up the ladder much easier. So maybe start with green balls or start playing doubles or dingles or whatever. Try to find like the way to get the longer rallies going instead of just going and trying to bash singles rallies and then you're like 1, 2 shots and one hits out and then it's not the most fun.
Yeah. So Simon was also quite, is a pretty new player. It was painful to rally with him, like when he was starting, and our friendship is very much like a just slightly pre-COVID, and then we were the only two people that we knew who really didn't care about germs. Um, and he was tough to play with. It was nice that he had a background in squash, but now that we've been playing so long and we like to like make those rallies a little bit longer, I get so much more satisfaction over making Simon bend over in pain because he's run so much rather than just slapping a giant winner. Um, so I think if you want to have like this macho attitude, but still get better at tennis faster, that's a good attitude to take. Make your opponent suffer as much as possible.
Yeah, I think the macho tennis, if we call it that, like, or the one like strike winners, which you see kind of is necessary on some parts of the tour. Like they need to hit so hard and finish a point so quickly. It's good that I think tennis had like even if it can be boring to some, but it has a bit more staying power if the rallies are longer, right? So like maybe go
Mm-hmm.
back 70s, 80s. Tennis, like okay, I can be bored to death maybe watching Borg and some guy play on a clay court where every rally is like 100 shots. Sure, that, but we have to also be a bit worried that it's like big serve and a 1-2 combination, because I don't think the crowd is gonna love like 1-2s, like or just be like
No.
boom boom tennis.
Yeah. And that, like, Federer, let's say Federer is the best 1-2 player ever. Maybe Sampras is arguably better. But growing up watching, I did not watch Fed's early rounds of Grand Slams because it's just like 1-2 done, 1-2 done. It. You want that kind of entertainment to be on the edge of your seat, and like one sport that I think does that probably the best out of anyone is the UFC. It's so exciting when you can see the guys just like, if you just open that small window, then you have a chance. So it's like must watch the whole time.
Yeah, that's where the drama is at its highest. I think it's also a physically like intimidating sport in a way, like you can really get hurt. But I think tennis sometimes, maybe with the scoring system, which I think is great in many ways, but it's also like since a set can take so long, and if you have kind of like a foregone conclusion result, which Federer had early when he broke through before Rafa came, it was a bit like, okay, it's gonna be 6-2, 6-3, or 6-1, 6-4, or 6-3. I mean, it's not even going to be a tiebreak in one of the sets, and I think that is tennis at its. I mean, I love watching Fed anyway because he's so graceful, but in any scenario, that is not tennis at its best. When like, okay, what's the score line going to be? That's all you're really watching for. You're not watching
Yeah.
for a surprise, or is this guy going to knock him out? So that's an interesting take, actually.
Yeah, and I think we have that a lot more now with the current crop, especially as Djokovic is aging. I struggled to watch pro tennis when it felt like Djokovic was just gonna take every single match. Even when he shows up, he's not playing well. You can kind of see that he'll just bear down and find a way to win. But now, like, okay, Sinner seems pretty unbeatable, but Alcaraz, one of the most exciting players, he's got vulnerabilities and people are finding them. And I think that leads to a lot more excitement. It leads to like way more open doors for interesting characters and from different countries to be more engaged rather than just having a handful of dominant countries. So then they travel to a country that's maybe less interested and you get no fan turnout, which we've seen stuff happen with the WTA, especially in that way.
Yeah, it's nothing worse when you're seeing tennis struggling with the crowd. Like I've been to ATP 250s. Like I mean, we have had you mentioned the WTA finals, which have had like a atrocious crowd engagement in the last couple of years. I would say like and sometimes in the ATP 250 you go, you're like there the first day. There's five guys in the crowd. Like
Yeah.
these are like the best players in the world. If you go like top 50, top 100, but still like there's five people there. So and then towards the quarterfinals, things pick up because you're getting closer to the weekend. People want to watch tennis. Maybe they've been working otherwise, but it's just like a little bit. I've always been thinking with the idea of like, can we do like a round robin, or can we do this in a different format so we don't have these dead days? Because a lot of people come to watch. Okay, I'm a Lorenzo Musetti fan. I want to see him play. Now he's quite good, but then he can also lose first round because he's not really that steady. So if you travel to a tournament to watch Lorenzo because you're his biggest fan, then he might leave first round. Like if there was a round robin format of some kind, like in the UTR or a double elimination, he would at least be around. So there would be less travel for the pros, which is better for the environment if we're gonna get like super macro. But and it's like more sustainable, I think, as a tournament, because the issue now is like even on the futures tour, you have guys like traveling half around the world play one round, lose first round, then they go somewhere else. They lose first round, then they go somewhere else, maybe win 2 rounds. It's just like not very financially sustainable. It's not very like environmentally sustainable. It feels like a bit of a weird sport, like where you're just traveling and then you get like you lose some round and then you have to travel again.
Yeah, as someone with a rich marketing experience like yourself, what kind of things would you like to see at the top level?
Tricky question, but I would like to see a changes in the four. I would like that they try a bit more. I know people are really like allergic to like these 4 sets. I like 4 games in one set with the next gen finals.
Hmm.
I think it can be get you can get used to everything, right? But I think anything to pump up the audience interaction a bit to make it a bit more engaging. I understand why people dislike coaching, but if you can make it into some kind of spectacle, whether it's like with mics, although that kind of defeats the purpose a bit, like you would do in UTS, I think it could be interesting, like to show like how more important is strategy for tennis. Like this guy didn't figure out what to do about this guy's serve, and then he gets some coaching. He's like suddenly he's locked in. He's finding the spots on his serve or whatever. So I think you have to kind of make the audience understand a little bit more how the tennis works, how the tennis on this level works, how many like small margins there are and tactics. And also think like maybe some kind of round robin until you get to the quarterfinal or something so that you change the format a little bit. It's not easy, but I think ATP they're probably really considering this stuff because I think it's something they need to
Yeah,
do for the sport's future. I think tennis is doing pretty well thanks to Alcaraz, like we mentioned, Sinner maybe as well. And after COVID, tennis grew. But if we
yeah,
keep doing the same thing for 10 more years, I don't know what's going to happen. It's tough to say. Are we going to be there in the same position? Or are we going to keep dropping? Like in terms of the US, I think tennis is quite low on the list of big sports. Like maybe, it's top
yeah,
10, but it's not top 5.
yeah. And we see that with our own audiences.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to not talk while I do this. My apologies.
You're talking and
Uh,
cooking now.
um,
Oh, nice. So for you guys listening, Beckett is kind of a chef, so he's quite good at cooking, and now he's making eggs and bacon, which is not really a die-hard dish to make, but it is good though. So we do applaud that.
yeah, I had Luca over for dinner last night, and I made some pad thai for him, and he seemed
Ooh,
to be pretty happy. He brought over a nice bottle of wine too, like way nicer than I would spend. I'm a real $15 a bottle kind of guy.
yeah. I've $15. You can get some decent wine. That's for sure. You don't need to splurge on it. But like a pad thai with some wine, that sounds like a jam. We were supposed to not to drink for a few days, Beckett. What happened?
I know. So for the viewers, the wine in sort of Southern California is pretty good. And when it's in front of you every night and you're having fun with a gang of people that are so fun to hang out with, it's so hard to say no to that couple of glasses. And I was just like hurting. We were all hurting by the end of the week. And I wasn't going to drink. And then he just brought it over. It wasn't my fault.
No, no, you are forgiven. No, I think to put some perspective, I think we didn't drink like insane amounts. It was just like when you have a little bit every night, it gets a bit, towards the end, you're like, okay, I'm not even enjoying the wine now. Now I'm just drinking the wine, even if it's like 1 glass or 2 glasses. You're like, okay, well, we gotta get wine. But we did do some nice wine tasting at Belliana
Mhm.
Vineyards in which I really enjoyed, and you enjoyed because you had more wine than I did because I was driving. So
Yes.
that
Jonas
was
made
nice.
sure I had a couple sips of each of his glasses.
Yeah, that happens. But it was yeah. So I also had some wine because I met my parents for the first time in a bit. So also had some wine. So we're both guilty. The only guy is who's still doing fine is Will. So we'll see if he gets on the wine train today later.
He seems like he's got more discipline than we do, so I believe in his personal strength.
Yeah, well, I believe in so too. Yeah, so tennis is an interesting riddle to solve. If we talk more about the trip as such, like we tried products we cannot talk about. This is always an issue. Like I was going through all my footage. I have like 100 gigs of footage or whatever from my whole LA part and the San Luis Obispo part. But like in so many of the clips, I'm seeing like rackets that are not supposed to be there because they're being
I,
released in January. So I'm thinking like, oh, and then like I have the big Bubba review I was gonna do, and then I have shoes that I'm not allowed to show, so I cannot show that clip either. So it gets a little bit tricky. All these embargoes are always like a bit of a headache, and you want to play ball with them because I understand if you develop like a product for 2 years and you're really excited about the launch and you're gonna sell a lot of rackets or shoes or whatever, and then some guys online are just like, oh, here you go, here, this is the new racket that's coming. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel nice. Like you have to understand it from their point of view as well, whether you like these companies or not. But this is what they're trying to do, and just ruining it for them. It doesn't seem so nice. So I'm gonna play ball, see what I can publish. But overall, like, what was your like takeaway in terms of like equipment for next year, without saying too much? I mean, we can say, I guess, what rackets are coming, but we cannot really like show them. I think that is the story of Morning Glory.
Yeah. So by far the bulk of the testing that we did for the videos was shoes, which I don't really care about. I'm a real like, you find the shoe you like, commit to it until they don't sell it anymore. But for the rackets, like I think 2024 was a bit of a lackluster year on most part. Like not a lot of rackets. No rackets came out that were really close to switchable for me or super in my wheelhouse. Part of that I think is because Head is so frequent with their updates, so nothing, it's become that they don't feel special when they come out. It's like, yeah, we know the paint is going to essentially be the same. They're almost like Audi, where all Audis look identical. It's like all these head rackets, really similar paint scheme, uh, really consistent yet um, incremental updates, right? So nothing is gonna blow us out of the park. But for this year, Head is putting out new stuff. The Technofiber is revamping one of, I think, their best rackets. Period. Yonex as well. Bablat. I think Bablat is probably doing the best out of the major manufacturers, and a big part of that is because they took such a pause through the COVID issues, so they had the time to really iron things out. And then all that stuff is coming like within the first month, so I don't know if it's going to be, or quarter 1 is all the good stuff and then it's kind of slows down, or if we're going to keep getting new things that we like.
Yeah, I have a feeling like Q1 is gonna be insane. I think that's like there's a heavy push towards like Australian Open, like all the lines you mentioned. You know, like that. This it's like they're gonna be power lines, they're gonna be control lines. It's gonna be a bit of a mix. But overall, like I feel like all the rackets I've tried now, I tried the T Dubs and I've tried before that are coming out in January. I'm like super excited about, and I'm worried that maybe Q2, Q3 they're like pretty lukewarm. But I overall I think for a lot of listeners and a lot of racket nerds out there, I think this is going to be a tough choice. Like you're going to have to
Yeah.
consider demos. You're going to have a lot of things to consider if you're looking into switching racket, because the choice will be heavy, and they all played like quite nice. I didn't pick up a racket and was like, okay, there were some cosmetics that I wasn't like super in love with, but overall the playability was very good. So I think this is going to be a tricky one for people to choose.
Yeah, we definitely saw some risky cosmetics that neither of us anticipated. But would you say you tried anything that could maybe be switchable? Because I certainly have.
Yeah, I have two. That I mean, it's tough when you can't really talk about them, but I'm really excited about like the one from Technofiber and the one from Yonex, for example. But I also like the Bubble stick. So for me, this was maybe the toughest one where I could like when I was switching in the Tennis Warehouse famous green room or whatever you call it, green court. I was like, this is nice, and this is nice, and this is nice, and this is nice, and you felt like, am I just being so positive because I'm at Tennis Warehouse and testing stuff that is not out? But then like you pick up some other rackets and you're like, okay, this I like. There was, for example, if you have a detective fiber racket, there was one that is 305 and there's one that's 315. I did not like 315, did really like 305. And so I think also the headline, I know I didn't like the lighter version, but I like the heavier version. So there's definitely exciting rackets, no matter if you're a power, like looking for power, if you're looking for control. I think this is pretty solid. So I think January is going to be super busy, Australian Open time, and then we'll see what happens for the rest of the year. But I'm like you with
Yeah,
shoes. Like we had Zach with us, as you might have seen if you follow like our Instagram, Tennis Nerd Insta, or seen other influencers post. But it's like he is such a shoe goat when it comes to reviewing shoes. Like he cuts them in pieces. He's a podiatrist. He talks about like breathability, can show data and stuff. So it's tough for me and Beckett to be like, okay, I like this shoe. It's but it's a bit big. It's like we're kind of
yeah.
dumbing it down too much. Then
And even if Zach wasn't such a beast, like the way that he visualizes all the testing that he does and makes it so consumable, it's like testing shoes is scary. If you get the wrong fit, you can't really wear it anymore, and it's hard to be authentic with your test because I think especially so many people are looking for a durability test, and you want that means that requires a certain amount of hours in the shoe. Whereas with rackets, you can kind of say this one was too stiff, it hurt me, and that's part of your review. But if it's these shoes didn't fit me, you can't. Then everything you say is kind of moot. I think. Like I had that issue with the shoes that we tried this week. Couldn't get the sizing right because we're ordering samples ahead of time, like early production samples. So it wasn't like we got to try a bunch of different sizes to make in case we're in between sizes, because that's what I think was with me. I was in between size on at least two pairs. One of them I go too small, one of them I go too big, and then that's just never going to be the kind of experience that's going to be that educational for anybody.
I think you raised a really good point, and that's been my main issue. Partly, I had also some sizing issues for this test, particularly because we got the shoes when we arrived, right? But then it's also the part where testing a shoe can be really detrimental. Like if you're playing, like if you're gonna wear a shoe down, or like the rubber, you're gonna wear it down a little bit. You need to play a lot, and if you're not comfortable, you're gonna injure yourself. Likely, I mean, not 100%, but I've had knee issues in the past. I don't want to risk injury. We're both playing like 5-6 times a week if we can. So I think it's like a worry to be like, okay, I'm gonna test this shoe, which I don't like for a while. While with rackets, you can be a bit on and off. I test this for 15 minutes. Okay, I need to change strings. Then you test it for 40 minutes the next day. Then you test it for 2 hours the next day, and it's you can keep and then you form your opinions. You give it to a few other playtesters, whatever. But a shoe, it's you has to be on your foot. You have to play with it. You have to try it and try to like give it some wear and tear. And it's yeah, I find it really complicated with shoes. That's what I've like really stopped doing a lot of shoe reviews. I can do one here and there, but it's for me. I have my shoe that I like. I don't want to try to mix up too much. Takes too much
Yeah.
energy.
Like the last thing we want is to have to take 1 or 2 weeks off, because then that's maybe we have a backlog of content that we can be supported through, but that's a big cog in your system. And like that's what Luca is dealing with right now. He just texted me, I found some yoga classes, are we going every day? I'm like, sure. I probably need to do that for sure, but when you're hurting, it hurts a lot more than just your body.
Yeah, so for you listening, Luca is Luca from Rackets and Runners, friends of Beckett and myself as well. He's been on the podcast. You probably listened to that one. Super nice guy, but he plays a lot of tennis and his body is hurting a bit. And he also plays a lot of pickleball as well. So, which is also not, if you're playing singles, if you're an aggressive mover like Luca is, like even pickleball is quite demanding on the body, I would say.
Singles pickleball, I think, is a little bit harder on the body. Everything is like within one giant lunge, so you can be putting a lot of pressure on every step. Whereas with tennis, you have a little more time to kind of create space and set up on the court. You could rely just on your serve and play fed like tennis, make it easy on the body, and have a long career. And you're not just half diving for every single shot.
No, it's a really good point. I think people underestimate the physicality of singles pickleball because it's like kind of like squash. You have to move really like with huge intensity. Otherwise, you're not going to reach the ball because it's quite fast. Like you're trying to cover a pretty decent rectangle, and the ball is moving fast. You have to stretch a lot, like like the ball is bouncing very low. It's not like a tennis ball. So it's quite a tricky sport to play singles. Doubles, okay, we can start talking about like maybe the physicality of the sport is not huge, depending on who you play. But it was, I mean, we did play some pickleball, and some fans will now completely tune off and turn off their subscription button and never listen to me again. But we did play some pickleball at Tennis Warehouse. It was forced upon us by a gun, as we couldn't really get out of it. But it was actually quite fun. So and we brought our inner like super testosterone to the pickleball court, which you have to do. It's part of the game, right?
Yes, yes. Jonas was had to wear extra big pants to fit his pickleball parts on the court. Um, Tons of screaming, tons of giant f bombs.
Yeah,
Um,
Zach was big on that. He was going nuts there. He like brought the pickle energy to the to the court.
yeah, he had that BDE going, huge. I didn't play with the boys. I played with Chris, Mark, and Naya, and thankfully Mark carried me to victory whenever I was on his team. He was really good. Like his strategy was elite. Um, Naya picked it up in like 2 seconds, and I felt like I was the worst player on the court for a good while.
It's tough. It's like you can see it with Will, for example, who's like a double specialist. Like he's kind of good at figuring stuff out. Like, all right, in pickleball, which I guess he plays a little bit, but not a lot. You need to make sure that the ball always stays low, and you need to like. I mean, we talk about dinking, and you don't know, you have to drink before you dink. I think is the famous tagline. And you like you dink it. You have to keep it like really loose and low. Because if you hit aggressive shots, like if it's a little bit high, someone just slaps it, so it's you're
Yeah,
in doubles, right? So you're done. So you cannot really like even try to go at the nets too hard. You need to like dink, 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 and then maybe you attack to kind of a surprised opponent, hopefully, right? It's an interesting game in that sense.
yeah. I think like Will has unbelievable hands, but for me, if you slap it at me, I'm not gonna get it. My reaction time is horrible. Like I'm not playing like first person shooters dialing in my like speed reaction time. So um, pickleball's fun. Will would say and we have to say it for Will that it's his favorite drinking game. And we did not drink when we played it, but I wouldn't have mind a couple.
No, it's pretty one of those sports that if you play doubles and it's in a casual format, you can have a beer or have a glass of wine on the sidelines. It works. And I
Yeah,
know there's pros that play like hardcore pickleball, and that's kind of a different sport. It's pretty physical, especially singles. But the way we played it was fun. The only thing that irks me, besides, I mean, they taking courts from tennis, which obviously it's an issue for all tennis nerds. But it's that like those fake lines, like even on Tennis Warehouse, we played on the tennis court, and they put up these like fake lines that move, which makes it a
yeah,
little bit annoying. So if you play on a specific court that's made and designed for pickleball, it's fine. But if it's you have to always make these makeshift lines, it's not the nicest in that sense. You want your solid lines.
yeah. We're pro segregation for tennis and pickleball.
Yeah,
Um,
you can play both, but I think they should be separate courts for them and even
yeah,
potentially facilities. But you can have like a racket, like a place where you have can play different racket sports. They have 3 pickleball courts. They have 5 tennis courts, whatever, right? But it's like it's good that they're separate. I think otherwise the war gets more intense.
yeah, and pickleball's more space efficient too, so you can get more people squeezed into the same space as tennis. I think it's a win-win for them getting their own courts. Even if it's to take down one tennis court to put in 2 permanent pickleball courts, especially with the popularity in North America, like I'm okay with it because it often means now the tennis court is something I can actually get on as opposed to in the past where it would just be full of pickleballers and you can't squeeze in.
No, I think that's a fair point. In Canada, where you are, is it pretty popular with pickleball, or is it more like tennis still? That's the main
No,
drive.
it's all pickleball is by far more popular. Tennis, and I think part of the reason for that is because of the retiree community. So you'll see pickleball courts essentially full all day, except for when it's very hot in the summer during the afternoon. Just like a 30-second walk from my house, there's tennis pickleball courts, and I play tennis on them only like midday during the week because it during the summer when it's too hot and pickleballers aren't out there. But otherwise, it's like morning, first thing, older players after work, uh, younger, very athletic people playing, and they're all having fun. Tennis in my area, a lot of the municipal money goes to the drug problem that we have, so the tennis courts are fewer and further between, especially ones in decent condition. So the ones that are around are get filled up fast after work. But I'm lucky that Simon and I will just hit during his lunch break, and I take a few hours off during the day.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. You need access to courts. It can be an issue in Marbella, where I am most of the time. It's pretty expensive to play as well. So there's not like I was impressed by the public courts that we saw in Slow. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like not a perfect court, but the court was quite nice. Like not a lot of cracks. It looked pretty good, you know. And you can play for free, as we did. And I think that was nice. Here you have to pay like $20 for an hour, you know, even on the clay court outside. So you can find a little bit cheaper if you're lucky, but it's generally quite expensive in this area where I live.
Yeah, for us, it's either free or viciously unaffordable, and you gotta wait like 10 years to get into the club. But the court quality in the US, because I was in Austin doing a collaboration with my friend in Winners Only, those courts were all super nice, very flat. We don't have that here. I think um, part of it is freezing, but part of it is just money that's invested into infrastructure is very different in Canada versus the US. Then the high school courts that we went to, because we did a shoot at the local high school, I cannot believe how nice they were. No high school in Canada would ever have courts of that quality. That's just like a perfect facility, lit, great fencing, lots of space.
Yeah, it's interesting with school sports, and we're talking college, we're talking high school in the US, because it's such a like a I wouldn't say like a money game. In some cases in college, it is because that's where it's pre-pro life. But it's that like the school sports in the states is like a life of its own, and then they have money for these facilities, which is really nice to see. Like as Beckett said, we played on some really impressive courts in the local high school there in Slow, and where Michelle from Tennis Warehouse coaches the team, and they won their
Yeah,
cup
they won.
now, so congrats to them. But Tigers. But I was really impressed by the quality, and like I would in Sweden, for example, like if you have public courts, which you would with Swedish taxes think would be pristine and made out of gold, they are like overgrown and nobody's playing on them. It's a bit sad. You need to be a member. We don't have a lot of like private clubs where it costs like a bomb to be a member. Where I think in the US you find some clubs. I went to a few private clubs like Beverly Hills, Malibu, Racket Club, super nice facilities, obviously in very expensive areas. And there you have waiting lists of several years. You have to pay like, 30K to be a member. It's a quite high. That's kind of tennis being too much tennis sometimes. You need to have the facilities to actually get tennis, get people to play tennis. And in Sweden in the 80s, 90s, where we had like a big boom in tennis because of the Swedish tennis players, there were a lot of public courts and people could play, and you saw them always busy when I grew up. But nowadays, like they're kind of like it's a bit lame to be playing tennis. It seems like in Sweden, especially, right? But so there's
Yeah.
something to learn from our Americans and their fabulous tennis courts. We did try a lot of rackets. We tried pickleball paddles. We tried shoes. We tried a bit of everything. But if we were leaving like 2020, 2024, yeah, that's how you pronounce it. What stood out to you? You said it was a lukewarm year, and I agree. I think when I did the video with Henrik, it was like you talk positively about certain rackets, and they were not like bad rackets usually, but it's like nothing really fantastic where you're like, this is a modern classic either. That was my feeling.
Yeah, I think my favorite racket of the year was probably the Strike 98 1619. I didn't try the whole line. I just tried the 100 1620, and that thing is a steaming pile. It was horrible. Um, the RF is interesting, but I think a lot of people take it are feeling like it's a bit of a cash grab because he's not playing anymore, and they're trying to say, well, if he did play, this is what he uses. And I can kind of feel it when I hit with it. But then, we hit this Pro Staff 97 V14. And I'm just like, give me that racket every single day of the week over the RF 01 Pro. I've revisited them both since I did my first review. And like every time I hit this Pro Staff, I'm like, this is so easy. This is something I could use every day. Okay, yeah, I'm getting pretty used to the 100 right now, but it's a surprisingly easy transition for me to go from my Era Rafa to the Pro Staff 97. I don't know if it's like the weight distribution or if it was because the one you brought was at like 30 pounds, so the launch angle is like easier to get used to. Um, but my two favorite rackets that I personally tested this year were from 2023. They were not new. It's like the 100D, the Percept, and the Aero Rafa. So I think that says enough of the story of what happened for releases.
Yeah, I agree. I think if I look back to 2023, like I really love the Aero updates. The Aero 98 is something I carry in my bag. I've sold one. I mean, we all make these mistakes. I don't need this anymore. I'd sell it and then or trade it. And now I traded one back with Eric from Toraline. So he got my Prestige and I got his Aero 98. And the Aero 98 is just a great racket. The Aero 100 is also a great racket. The Aero Rafa, which I tried with you. Video to come about that one is also a great racket. So the arrows were like you're I think that was one of the best updates of a line in a long time, where like you have three, and if your Origin was also a fun racket, so like you had actually four rackets, and not using the extended or lighter models, even talking about those, but whereas like all those rackets are good. Like this is a good update to a line that is probably the best selling line at the moment, right? Blade this year was good. I know you're a Blade. You don't like Blade. I was gonna say Blade hater, but Blade.
I'm a Blade hater.
Yeah, you're not a Blade fan. I can buy that in a way because like um if you play the Pro Staff 97, which we both tried on and off during our trip here, and you play the Blade, the new Blade, I tend to always go to the Pro Staff. I just feel more at home, and that could be like coming from the 6195, liking weight and balance distribution, being more headlight. And I feel like the Pro Staff has a little bit less muted feel than the Blade, which this generation was pretty muted. Like very good rackets, in my opinion. I know many that like the 100 for example, but it's like quite a muted racket. So it's not like a you. It's not you hand it to me and I'm gonna be like, well, I'm switching. That's gonna be tricky. There's always something where I start getting a little bit irked by it at some point.
Yeah, I struggle with the Blade also. Like I use the BLX, the gold V3, and it really feels like it's such a different racket in terms of what is that racket's identity from when the Blade came out to what it is now. It feels like they took it from like it was the modern player's racket, is like what Andy from Tennis Warehouse used to call it. Um, it was stiff, it had the high swing weight, but it was light, so you could still swing it fast. And like that's what the strike is now because of the Blade. It's kind of birthed all this other competition, and I don't know if Wilson doesn't feel like they can keep up with the other brands on that trend, or if they just have a completely different vision. But it feels like the Blade has moved into this becoming more of a soft, buttery, smooth racket. But then I feel like it doesn't have the weight that it needs to play that way. And like I got a stiffer, more spin friendly, easier plow through, easier to hit through the court from the Pro Staff V14 than I would with the Blade. And then especially now with the RF01, which has this lower RA, I think it's a little easier to use in the Blade. I really am seeing less and less of a use case for what these blades have become than when they were older.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fans of the old blades. I mean, V5s, V4s. You talked about with V3, I guess. The V6 everybody hated, but V7 was really nice and plush, and V8 stiffened up a little bit. Now this one was a bit more muted towards the V8, if I remember correctly. But I really think like we talked about it a lot as well. Like modern rackets, like you feel like you need to be in the mid 60s stiffness now to give you something on the ball. Otherwise, you need more weight, and most people don't want weight on the racket, so you need that like strong 65 RA. Whether it's 100 or a 98, maybe doesn't matter that much. But like that's where the Radical MP, for example, which is a racket I like, a current one, the Aero 98, that's the Aero Rafa you play. I think is pretty around like a lot of good rackets are in the like 65, 66 strong stiffness. So
Mm-hmm.
around unstrung 69, 68 drops 3 points. And I think that's where you get some power, but you can still have good feel, but it's not like overpowering or over stiff either. So you're not like hurting yourself and you're being able to control the ball. Because when they're down to 60s and we're like low 60, 60, 61 strong, you have a little bit less on the ball, and the sweet spot is more demanding. And I even felt that with RF01, the more I play with it, it's like a 61 strung, and then the sweet spot is pretty small. You know, if you had that a bit stiffer, it would be a bit bigger sweet spot, hopefully. But the RF Pro is not that huge of a sweet spot either, so I don't know if it's the engineering of the frame or something. But it's like it's a difficult. The RFs are very difficult rackets. Like it's for the connoisseur, I would say. Like Munich.
Yeah. And yeah. And for the two of us, like I think we're both kind of trending in the same way where we're seeing how much having this extra power helps. And one of the things that frustrates me about having these lower flex, and it depends where they put the flex point, because again, we both agree that RA is a very limiting indicator on how a racket plays. If you have a bunch of hoop flex like the Phantoms that we hit while we were down there, or the Clash, then it feels like the hoop can twist if you hit a little bit off center. And it's not even like you didn't hit the sweet spot, so you're missing. It's like you get the frame bending, and then the launch angle and everything just becomes quite inconsistent. And like I hit with the new Clash that came out, and I'm still having a lot of the same kind of feelings about this new one compared to the old one, where I can only swing it so fast before it kind of starts betraying me.
Yeah, it feels like the rackets with a lot of flex. Like I've looked at like slow motion footage when I play with my old Prestige 2019 MP, which is still one of my favorite rackets. Like I really love how that racket responds, and it's so thin, so you can whip it. But you see in slow mo how the racket really bends, and like how the power of the ball, like of the weight of your shot, is kind of being like drawn out of your shot. So it's like it really ends up being quite noodly for the guy on the other side of the net, and that's something you have to think about as well. Where like if your opponent is getting easy shot, even if you're making all the shots, but they're easy for your opponent to attack, then it's not good for you. I mean, if you want to play on any higher level or any like competitive
Yeah.
level, you need to make sure that you also your shots have something on them. So it's not like an easy sitting duck for a good player to beat you.
Yeah. Like playing when we are hitting, and I was still kind of getting a feel for your ball, but it's like you go to a Phantom or a Gravity Pro, and suddenly your ball's not giving me any issues. But then you go to something stiffer like a T fight, and you're cranking winners by me inside in on the forehand, like it's a hot knife through butter or something. It with the swing speeds being so much higher now, I feel like that stiffness just gives you so much more access to power, and like serious power, like not just the feeling of hitting it harder, but like the ball comes through the court, it bites with spin, and it doesn't just kind of sit up for your opponent to eat for lunch.
No, and it's clear that even on like, I mean, we're talking pro level, but we're dropping down quite a few levels. Power still makes a difference because now most like rec players are playing with like pure drives, they're playing with arrows, they're playing with head extremes or whatever, like a more powerful racket. So they getting more on the ball, and even okay, then the footwork will not be obviously as good as some really strong players and other issues, but the shot penetration can be quite tough. Like even on a like a 4-5, 4-0 level like that, if they have a good shot. For example, like you play the winners only guy. Who has a huge serve? Like his ground strokes are not as good as yours, but he has a very good serve for his level. So this can also be like one guy you're playing has a average footwork and 3-5 game, but then he has a forehand which is like a 5-5 or 5-0. Something you can play guys like that.
Yeah, and then having this extra power on your racket will just help you find that shot to help counteract it. Like if I'm hitting with a Phantom or that your Prestige MP, and I'm trying to return Trey's monstrous 114-mile-an-hour serve or higher, if he's really leaning into it, there's no way I'm getting balls back. I need something stiff. I need a big head size. And then at least I get the ball in the court, which gives me a much higher chance to win the point just because I'm a pretty good mover and I like to stay in the rally.
You're a very good mover. You run down a lot of shots actually, and the Aero Rafa seems to suit you also because you have quite of a Western forehand. Before you play with the Solinko 98 whiteout, right? And what prompted you to switch? Was it like just an aha moment from trying the Rafa, or did you have like a long process, or how did that work out for you when you actually made that switch from the Solinko?
Yeah, so I really liked my Slinko. I still like it. Um,
Was it the
The
1820,
average,
by the way? You're right.
it,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was the 1820. And that might seem counterintuitive, and it's because I never tried the 1619 in the standard length. I only tried it in the extra long. I When we began discussing me doing some testing with Solinko, I only asked for the 1820 because you said had good things to say about it. So I was like, okay, that seems like the one. And then I hit it, really liked it. I really needed new rackets at the time. My extreme tours just weren't giving me anything because I'm a believer that rackets do definitely wear out. It had been over 2 years that I was using them, so they're feeling soft. So the whiteout was perfect for me. Really easy to play my game. I get this Aero Rafa to review, and it just felt so right away. Like I got all the spin and racket head speed that I was missing from my Slinko. And looking back, I think I was one of the things that I struggled with my whiteout compared to even my extreme tour before is this looseness and snap through the forehand. Like for me, the forehand is really where I notice difference in playability between rackets. So I'm just kind of able to relax, let it fly, and trust that spin to come back down. Whereas I felt like, even though I thought the hitting feel of my whiteout was among the best I'd ever tried after I had set it up like super solid, super connected, super pure, I never got this looseness and this freedom, which I think really increases my power, my spin, and my reliability from all areas of the court. So it wasn't an instant switch for me because it took me a while to dial in the specs that I have on my Rafa. But it was something that I started trying, and I just kept on going. I don't want to play with my whiteout anymore. It's the Rafa is what I want to pick up. So because old me would have done a racket journey tennis spin style where you kind of go, this is what I'm looking for, and you engage your audience, and this one just snuck up on me. And now I'm thinking, do I stock up on 10 of these things because I'm worried they're not going to make another version, or do I trust that something else that I like is going to come along and just be patient for whatever's next?
It's a good point. Like the racket journey. I mean, what Nicola, my buddy from Intuitive Tennis, is also doing his racket journey, and it's not easy to find a new racket. And we both know, and many who are listening, how difficult it is to find, because you can find a racket. A lot of people, they don't give it enough time, which is one issue. You mentioned actually having to dial in, and that's for everyone, right? I think the first impression has to be good. Like if you don't like
Yes.
the racket from the first hit, you will grow to maybe like it more once you understand it. But I do doubt that you will switch to a racket that you dislike from the first get go. I
I
really,
agree.
really have a feeling like the gut instinct will tell you like this is not for me, and then you might grow to like it more, but you won't grow to love it. So it has to be first love, but then you have to let the relationship develop, right? You can't just like go and okay, I'm going to buy 10 of these, which Henrik usually does, and he has to sell them. He usually buys four, and then he's been better though. He's behaved better now when we found this Aero 98. It's just sticking to that one and winning, which is good. But I think like so you pointed out, like take time. Rackets do wear down 100%. We see that with the pros, they get 6 to 8 rackets shipped like every quarter, 6 months, depending on the contract, because the rackets they play, they get a low wear and tear, and they get softer, and then you have nothing on the ball, like that crispness, that stiffness that dies after every string job, which is important. Like even if you don't play that much, but you restring your racket for whatever strange reason you're doing that. So stringing and playing will wear down the rackets. So I think that makes sense, and it makes sense. Like I'm the same, similar in a way. Like I've always gravitated towards control rackets, but now that I've been playing more with the Aero 98, Drive 98, I feel like the easy power is kind of addictive. Like the power in itself that you can play these shots that you can't do with the Prestige, and you have more on the defensive shots for me, especially like if I have to run something down, I'm getting more on the ball. It's just like so much easier to play tennis overall, even if you have to dial it in. So I think not being too too like highbrow with your racket choice and like, oh, I'm a prestige forever, but considering like maybe I need to go with the times. And I mean, even Andy, like East 100, like came out of nowhere, but I saw some clips of him. Was it today? He was doing some drama production stuff. I have no idea what it is, but he was still holding the East zone, so he's not like going back to the radical now that he's not playing anymore.
That's
So
funny.
It's quite funny actually that you see it because he's not sponsored by Yonex, right? So this is
No.
just his own choice. You know, he could easily been like, okay, I'm a legend. I always play with the PT7A. I'm gonna keep holding it because I don't play matches anymore. But in the video, which was like unrelated to his tennis career, I think he holding the E-zone. So I think power is addictive, but also for a reason, right?
Yeah, for me, I love the power just on the rally ball. Just like, yeah, it's nice to pull off the miracle shot, but I'm a real like everyday consistency kind of person. So I wanna get the most out of what I do the most often. So like I make coffee every day. So I like put some time into like making sure my pour over is pretty good. Or I'm a keyboard mechanical keyboard addict. So I'll like build a keyboard that feels and sounds the way I want it to sound. Um, with so going to a more powerful frame, it's like if you can find one that you like the feel of, it's just like that feeling of hitting a heavier, more penetrating ball just on the every single day shot is so rewarding, I think.
Yeah, it's the average shot. Like we can't think of the yeah. What I meant like with that is like yeah, you have to think of the rally ball. Like in my case, the defensive rally ball where you have to run something
Yeah.
down from a strong player. And if you're using a like very flexible racket, like the ball is too short and the guy just hits it for a winner, so having that rally ball, and also like I think in tennis, the two most important shots really, if you play matches, is like serve and return. So if you're
Yeah.
playing a good serve, you have nothing on the return, it's very bad, and also nothing on the serve, you get no free points. You're just like running uphill all the time because you want to look cool swinging a prestige. I'm not talking to myself now. It's like a self therapy session. You have a really cool racket display behind there. Like, what's the criteria for a racket staying in that display and not being sold or given to some homeless child in Ethiopia?
Good question. So if it was a gift to me from someone, it almost always will stay. I'm a big sentimental guy, I guess.
Do you get
And
sentimental with gifts from Tennis Warehouse as well, or no?
I will just no, I don't count brand gifts.
No, like, that's what no,
Unless
it was a joke, but yeah, I mean brand
yeah,
gifts. Yeah,
except for like Eric gave me a pro stock from Toraline. So he gave me a pro stock and it's like
nice.
my first pro stock. So
What
I'm
pro
gonna
stock is it? I'm just curious.
it's uh it's a Robredo Dunlop 3/4 inch extra long of a 6/195.
Ooh, it's a Dunlop, right? It's a 924, I think. That pro
Uh,
stock code, yeah.
I think it's like option two or something.
Yeah, it's a 924. I'm pretty sure. Sorry for all the
Okay.
nerd lingo here, but I know that
Yeah,
model.
you're better about all this than me. So like it doesn't have PWS, right? So
No,
like they couldn't put that on there, but if you look at the throat shape, it's like exactly the same.
that's a good stick.
But it's pretty much unplayable for me. The swing weight's like 360 because it's extra long and it's stiff. Like it feels like over 70. I don't know how he used that thing with one-handed backhand either. That'd be tough.
Yeah, those guys are beasts. Like that's the thing when you play pros. Like some pros, obviously, you talk about Alcaraz playing like close to stock arrow. I mean, the way he swings the ball, he can do that. Stiff racket as well. But then you have pro like older guys pro stocks like the Novak Andy stuff. That's just 360, 370 swing weight. It's gonna tire you out playing with that, but fun to have in the collection, I guess.
Yeah, and then I'll also keep stuff if I think it's going to be relevant for future reviews. For example, the Arrow 98, I believe to be arguably, at the very least, the best racket in the world. It's so balanced, does everything well. It's so hard to compete against. Like I don't think any manufacturer has really like provided something that properly competes against the Arrow 98. So I'll keep that one. Keep stuff in my own collection. I keep rackets that I grew up using, so I try not. I used to sell the frames when I was done with them, but I'm trying not to do that because I like seeing the story of how I've personally progressed. And then if I have a so far, if I have a prototype racket and I don't know what to do with it because you can't really sell it, like should I throw it out? I don't know. So those are still up back behind me.
Makes sense, yeah. I think so. I think you
Yeah.
can keep everything, keep what's relevant. I think that's important. Like if sometimes if you a review is coming up for a new generation, it's kind of good to have the old generation to compare it with, unless
Mm-hmm.
you remember it. Like muscle memory kind of I remember most rackets I've noticed. Like that's like one generation old. I know how they feel, you know.
Yeah.
But still, it's good for the video if you're doing a video to make sure that you have it on tap, right? That's what does Simon use, by the way? I haven't asked that question.
So he's in the progress of making his video. He's using the 1619 XTD whiteout. Because the last time we updated on what Simon was using, he was using the Air 98, but he just wasn't. You know how it is with the Air 98. You go through it, you like it because it helps you play well, but you don't always feel the soul of the racket. Like it doesn't give you that connection. And for him, as someone who's I would say rapidly improving, having a little bit more feedback from your racket to tell if you hit it off center or not, not really letting you get away with those bad balls. That's what he said really helped him. Um, so he's using that. He really, really liked the Pure Drive that we tested last. And so I think he's kind of thinking about jumping on the 100 square inch train. I don't think he'll stay extra length because for testing rackets, it's too frustrating to have to adjust your contact point by that much. So looking at going standard length too.
I think that makes sense. I always thought that, like, if I had a extended racket, even at 27.25, like the Wilson Tour 95 models, which were very nice, or like Steam 100 Pro Stock BLX ones that are used by Maradona. They're very good rackets, but the 27.25 when you're testing, even that small 0.25-inch extra length is gonna screw you up in the first. So then you have to adjust to the test racket, test maybe plural test rackets, and then you have to adjust back once you're done with them. And then like then you're throwing your being a tester and wanting to play decent tennis is already a conundrum. So you're making it even more of a complication by just like going different lengths as well. So it's already tricky because you have a spec, maybe you customize your racket, and then you're going to a completely different spec, mold, grip, everything, right? And so you need to be able to adjust back, and that's something I've been struggling with over the years. It's like, okay, once sometimes you get so adjusted to the new racket that you're like automatically just switching to it because like, okay, I'm used to this now because I've been testing it so much. So you need to kind of have a process where you go back to your current frame. Like how do you do that when you review frames? Like you have the Rafa now, you're playing well with it. Do you always keep it in the bag? You always warm up with that one. Do you always end your session with that one to make sure it stays like muscle relevant to you?
I almost always do warm up with it, although lately so I've been a little bit more picky about what I review in the last year because I don't put out videos as often as you, which I'm lucky that I can get away with that. But I also have kind of gotten into this place where I don't want to test something unless I think I'm gonna like it, because it's hard to test things for that don't feel fun. Um, so I'm not anymore am I showing up with like 5 rackets in the bag. So I'll warm up with my Rafa, then I can go to like the one, maybe 2 rackets that I happen to be working through, hit with them for a while. Usually it's a tough adjustment because my Rafa spec is weird. Like there's no racket that feels like that, I don't think. And then I'll probably get frustrated that I'm sucking because I can't hit as heavy with like anything compared to my Rafa, and then I'll just go back with it and try to like work on my game a little bit. So I often won't do much more than let's say 30 minutes of racket testing in a session. Because I want to get those reps in. I want to put on a sweat, and it's hard to put on a sweat if you're not super connected to the frame, I find.
I think this is a good point. I think many people might not realize like how frustrating it can be. It sounds like we're sitting on some gold chair and like, oh, it's so much fun to be a racket tester. It is fun. We had great time in Tennis Warehouse. A lot of work required to test rackets actually if you do it on like a professional basis, but there's also a lot of frustration, you know, like this, like when you're having to do a review, you're not finding it the most enjoyable racket. It's maybe lukewarm, like it's not a bad racket, but it's like it doesn't give you what you want. It maybe doesn't feel so great. And then you still have to put in the hours because you have to put in the hours, but maybe then you have to like half an hour there, 1 hour there, half an hour there, restring, try it again. Does anything improve? Add some weight. Did it improve? You have to give it time. and then you kind of missing out on the what you like to do, which is actually breaking a sweat, hitting some good tennis balls. And I really echo that sentiment that you put there, because it's like sometimes you're like, I'm not feeling this racket. If you bring too many rackets, sometimes you have a very busy period. That's also frustrating because you don't really vibe with one, and you have like five in the bag. It's not the best either. So it can be a tricky one to find the balance where you actually make sure that you also enjoy your passion and your hobby, which is playing tennis, and not only doing it for the testing.
Yeah, that was something I had maybe a year ago where I was like focusing a lot more on review content, and my schedule was 2 videos a week, and so I was like jam packed. Every session had to be filming a different racket, and that's when you see the hitting footage of me like struggling a lot more on court. Like, okay, I wasn't as in good shape back then, but it's so hard to find a groove when you're trying all these things. And I think for me to really understand a racket, or to get anything out of trying something new, is I have to figure out how to play well with it. And that's something that I learned from AC Tennis when he came on your podcast, because he's maybe the most diligent out of all of us in terms of making sure he puts in tons of hours, and even changing his technique to fit with certain frames, which is something that I've realized is maybe necessary as well to get the most out of something.
Yeah, that's what, like one reason I think it's tough to improve, and I've had a long time struggling to improve, was that you adjusting the technique screws you up, right? So you're just like, okay, a spin racket, I have to spin it more, otherwise ball flies, and like you have to do this. You don't want to string it like 57 pounds or whatever, like, which is maybe too high for most arms. So yeah, kudos to AC. He's doing a great job, as to many other playtesters. But it's like it can be an issue to get used to to rackets, and really feel like, all right, this can be good for me, when your whole body screams this is not good for me. So then you have to still give it like an unbiased opinion as possible, and say, okay, this could work for XYZ, but it doesn't work for me. And you've tried string customization and all this stuff. So I think this is and like you said, I think the schedule of videos, which is another interesting topic, especially for us dealing with YouTube, is like can lead to some kind of burnout when you start pushing the schedule. I've done that over periods. I don't know why you get just like, okay, I have to test this, boom boom boom. I have 5 rackets, 3 strings, 1 shoe, whatever, and you're like, I need to do this, and then you're just not playing good tennis. You're not enjoying it so much. You're squeezing in time by the editing station, which is not always the most fun. And then everything suffers. The quality of video suffers, the hitting suffers, and it's not like so enjoyable. So I think once a week for me is a bit better. I mean, I do podcast as well and a member video, but that's still like less than I used to do.
Yeah, and I think the viewers can see when you're not is into the racket, and so it's just a better experience for everyone when you're having fun. Um, I found myself, since I watched AC come on, like I'll adjust my forehand grip, like go full more Western, roll it back closer to like a conservative semi-Western to try to get the most out of frames. Like, and because I'm still relatively new, like I've been say doing that for 8 months, I'm finding I haven't quite gotten to like where I can go, oh yeah, this is a Western grip racket. Like the Pure Drive 98, I thought this is certainly like a conservative semi-Western grip racket, but I finally hit it well when we hit um, on our hooky day. And I had to go like all the way back down and like go for a much more bent arm through the stroke to like really feel like I was getting anything.
Yeah, I think that happens, but like it's also an issue, I guess. Like if we're testing rackets, we tested many rackets, and we keep testing many rackets. But if you're just a casual player, you're probably not gonna change technique to suit the racket, right? Like you're probably
And you
gonna be
should,
like,
yeah.
this is not for me. This is for me. And some guys with super flat strokes, they're not gonna like certain types of rackets. Guys who play ultra spinning, not gonna like certain rackets. One topic we talked about in San Luis Obispo was also this, and it depends on the players, that should you kind of go for a spinny rackets when you're a flat player, and kind of a more flat-ish trajectory racket when you're a spin player, or should you accentuate and maximize your strength, which like you go for spin, more spin, 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 or you like, I'm a flat player, I'm going to go 95, 18, 20. What's your feeling and take around this topic?
So I don't believe in spin rackets for specifically going, okay, that one is yellow, so it's spin. Like my experience with the Pure Aero 98, for example, is that it feels better when I hit it flat. So I think there are one thing that I've been thinking about a lot is like the concept of swing feel. So how a certain racket feels to swing, and that's more than just swing weight. So that's how we used to use swing weight. It's like it tells you how heavy it is, but it's more about how heavy it is. It's also about how the racket kind of rotates through your swing and how it settles into the slot. And so one of the reasons that I like the my Rafa so much is because as a spin player, I can it's very easy for me to modulate the angle of the racket face and get the kind of awareness of where my tip is at uh, through the stroke. And for me to be able to get this racket up to like a high 330 swing weight, there's no other racket that I can have that level of racket angle modulation and still have that high swing weight. So that's why I'm liking it right now. I also had a very good success with that with the Slinka Whiteout. But on the other hand, something like that Pure Aero 98, which seems like it's a spin racket on paper, I don't have that kind of tip modulation. And so I end up just striking through the ball instead of brushing or engaging this kind of up and down wrist motion as much or getting as much of a leg back like when you're getting this racket leg. Um, so I think it's more about finding the racket that feels as effortless as possible for your technique. So if you feel like you're forcing the spin because you're using something that's more maneuverable, like the Aero Rafa, that's probably not good for your technique. If you feel like you're forcing the flat with something like maybe the Radical MP, which I thought was a very kind of flat striker, maybe that's not the best for your technique. I think what you should chase is that effortless feeling on court where it lets the racket lets you play the shot that you want to play the most for whatever situation.
Yeah, it's interesting the whole spin. Like, so they put yellow on spin and blue on power and red, black on control, kind of. There's precision and control if you look pro staff and blade. If you look at the lines, kind of, and then some have comfort rackets. I put kind of clash into comfort category, which is a bit strange, but it's tough to categorize otherwise. But I think like the spin rackets, it's what they sell is just like a little bit more launch generally. But in some
Yes.
cases, like I tried new Dunlops, blacked out rackets, and I felt like the trajectory was much lower for a spin racket than I thought, and for like the Extreme Tour, or now called
Yeah.
Extreme Pro, the launch angle is pretty low. It's still a bit higher than the Radical, but it's like quite low. Like it's not, and the Aero 98 I feel has pretty high. So it's like for me, it feels like it's about launch angle there, and for the blue rackets, it's about stiffness, so more through power. And it's not telling the issue with this, like which you pointed out, is like it's not telling the customer what they should go for. It's telling you what you get with the racket. So it's telling you like this racket is if you want higher launch, this racket if you want more through power, this racket if you want less power. Like kind of it's like this is it. And then what works for you, there's really no easy way of describing it. It's just like, hey, demo 16 rackets. And I think I get questions, and I'm sure you do too, about like what racket should I use based on my style and level. And the issue is obviously you cannot like go to a golf pro and use a simulator and then you're with someone. Like the golf situation is much better because you're hitting and you're seeing, okay, you're hitting like 15 feet longer with this club, and we just need to have the extended one because then it's better for your body. While tennis players, they need to just look at reviews like yours and mine, and then order some demos, or maybe if they can afford it, just buy one and then they sell one or ship it back. So it's a bit like you're working in blind in tennis a bit more. Yeah, the guy, you just have to buy the racket, try it, and then sell it, and then you just keep in this endless loop.
And they do have Hawkeye courts. Like there's one in Australia that's been talked about more publicly as of late. And like you can get, the data. You're hitting more spin, you're hitting more power, and maybe you're more accurate. But does that translate to confidence? That's a huge X factor that's so important with tennis. Confidence is everything. If you're in a pressure moment, you're playing for $1 million, you need to feel confident in the shot that you're about to hit. And that's why I really support the feeling the sentiment that your racket should feel effortless to you, and you don't want it to be something that you think about. Like, if you play a shot and then you think about your racket right after, especially if it's not 100% positive, then okay, maybe you have a ego problem or you just blame other things. But that's something that's going to stand in your way, and it's not going to lead to full confidence.
No, I think it's a good point, and I think the feel department is important in tennis. Like, I mean, you see that with muscle memory. Like the pros, even if they want more power, because they all talk about more power now, you uh, pretty much also for up to the top, 10. It's still also a thing about if you can hit your money shot at juice in the 5-6 at the third set, that's not a good like you need to be able to hit that shot, and that's related to how you feel with the racket because you can't think about the shot, you have to just hit it. Like tennis is not a sport where you can let your mind do anything. Your mind has to be calm, like a lake, like they talk about in this famous book, and then you have to just let your body and racket work together. And if they can't work together because you're second guessing the racket or just overthinking your shots, then it's not for you. So I think this is a very good point, that it has to feel natural every time you're playing. Like if this feels at home for you.
Yeah, and that's what I think is funny about AC Tennis, who's changing his technique depending on the match play. It's like, well, then how do you know what your home is? So I'm a big believer for a lot of if you're doing a lot of testing or if you're a reviewer, that you should have something in your bag that helps you dial it in.
Yeah, I think this is a great advice. And whether that's an old frame or whether that's something new, but if you're, I've noticed in times where I'm like, I go to a competitive match and I have three new frames and I'm just, fucking around. Sorry for the expression. And it's just like, then I have no baseline to go to. Like if my prestige isn't there or something that I feel like this is my home body, and if I'm not playing well, then I'm like lost completely. Like there's mentally, it's really difficult because there's nothing there that's gonna help you get back to square one. So I think that's tricky. So when you're switching racket, I think you should really hold on to your old rackets until
Mm-hmm.
you 100% sure that this is now your new old racket, right? Like your new home racket. Because I think people sometimes, oh, I found this is much better. I'm selling the three ones I have of this pro staff or whatever. And then they play some matches and they're like, oh, it's not going well. And my old rackets are gone. So if you can't
I
hold
think it's
on,
got to work for at least a month
yeah.
before you can really say like, this is my new racket.
Yeah, and but we have situations, and this is one of the topics that Henrik and I have discussed when he was here in Spain and he was playing this UTR tournament because he had two rackets. He had one control racket, he had one Aero 98, which is more of a power spinning racket. And when he lacked control, he went to the control racket. When he lacked power spin, he went to the Aero 98 was base racket. I thought this was pretty good. Brittany on the
Mm-hmm.
Instagram talked about this concept as well. She likes E Zone. She likes she likes V Core. So she goes in between the V Core 100, E Zone 100, depending on like she wants more explosive spin, maybe more power. The V Core 100, E Zone a little bit more flat. It's powerful, but it's more like flat trajectory. So she can
Yeah.
modulate based on that. And I think that's a pretty good idea actually, like to have two different ones. I mean, unless you're playing maybe ATP finals, but most of us won't do that. So
Yeah, well, that's why I only have one racket. I'm actually about to step on court for my ATP finals match. So,
awesome, man. It was nice talking to you.
yeah, long time no see since 2 days ago.
Yeah, we haven't met in 2 days, so this was a required recap of what went on. More content to come from Beckett. Check out Tencom on website, YouTube. Most of you already follow him. Great guy and great player and reviewer as well. So have a nice day now, man.
And don't forget to play some tennis.